Hey, I'm Smooneychad, and I'm trying to beat Kerbal Space Program 1 using aircraft only. And today we're going to be trying to build a low-tech SSTO that'll take us all the way to Minmus and back while getting as much science as we possibly can along the way. But as with most of my missions, that might not be as easy as it sounds. First up, of course, we're going to head over to Mission Control and see what kind of contracts that we can get as we work our way up to Minmus. First up here is an Explore the Mun contract, which is basically just orbiting the Mun and coming back to Kerbin. I also found this contract just to take a billionaire named Tito Kerman into orbit for about 4 hours, which works out pretty good because I was wanting this SSTO to be able to have some kind of crew capacity so we could actually take other Kerbals other than Jeb into orbit. And to do that, we're going to go ahead and take our leftover science and grab this tech node, which has a crew cabin. And once we grab that, we got everything to start up on our SSTO. The basic plan for this is to have a crew of about 3 maximum and be able to pack every single science part that we've got along with it. And of course, it needs to have a pretty long range since it's going to be orbiting the Mun and Minmus and everything. We're going to kind of make a dollar store version of a Rapier engine by taking a Terrier and putting a Panther over top of it. That also has the added benefit of basically making the Terrier engine more aerodynamic without adding an extra nose cone part. Also, by complete accident, this SSTO came out basically perfectly balanced. The center of mass with it completely empty and the center of mass with it completely full is basically the exact same. I actually thought the RCS build aid was glitched out and wasn't showing me the empty center of mass there for a minute, but turns out, yeah, it's just like basically perfectly balanced. I was experimenting with adding some drop tanks to extend the range, but turns out that since we don't have fuel lines unlocked, we have no ability to cross-feed fuel between the drop tanks and the main tanks, so there's really no way we can do that currently. Also added these ventral fins on the bottom because I was kind of concerned that our single vertical stabilizer there just wasn't going to cut it, especially on a re-entry in the thinner atmosphere and stuff, in keeping this thing stable and not, spinning like a top. We're going to name this the SO7 Cardinal and take it out to the runway for its first test, and of course we're going to load up Tito Kerman because here at Smooneychad Aerospace, we value the safety of our customers, and absolutely nothing bad ever happens on the first flight. We're going to head into the FreeIVA view though, and check on Tito here in the back. I absolutely love this mod. It is so great to finally be able to cross between different cockpits and stuff that are connected. There is Tito, and he is looking prepped and ready for the journey. I really can't tell if he has any emotion about this whatsoever, but I can almost guarantee that he'll show some emotion by the end of this flight, because excitement is always guaranteed. We're going to take off using the afterburners, which is always an awesome shot, and I found out that this thing actually flies pretty much perfect right out of the box, which is extremely fortunate for Tito, who is pretty much chilling in the back here, because usually my maiden flights both start and end on the runway, and not in the good way. I was kind of concerned though, because we weren't gaining speed quite as fast as I thought we should, and we started losing speed pretty quickly, and that was because I left the landing gear down. Classic move there. So we put those back up and continue our ascent to orbit. This is the same thing I usually do with these SSTOs. I try to go as far as we can until we start losing speed on the normal dry mode, and then switch it over to wet mode or afterburners to gain as much speed as we possibly can, which usually ends up being about 850 meters per second. If I'm efficient with it. Once we're up to a good altitude, I lit the Terrier engines, which you really couldn't tell if you weren't looking for it. You can just tell that the plumes there got a lot brighter. Here are Panthers cut off, and that is just the Terrier engines on the inside glowing through the Panthers. I think that's an awesome look right there. It really is like almost like a dollar store Rapier engine if you set those up correctly. Unfortunately though, the Terrier engines have like a fourth of the thrust of like a Reliant engine, which we'd been using on our SSTOs, but they're a lot more efficient. So we did have to take a pretty steep angle at some points, which, of course causes drag losses, but it's better than, just dipping back down into the atmosphere and not ever getting to orbit, period. So it was a very long ascent to orbit, and Tito is officially not really having that much fun. Luckily though, fun wasn't part of the contract, so we continue coasting up to our apoapsis now, blazing through the upper atmosphere, and I notice a little twinkle in the distance. It's the Kcalbeloh, whatever, it's black hole spelled backwards system, and that's the interstellar system that we're going to be visiting much later in the series, beckoning to us, waiting for us to get more technologically advanced. And right around here we complete our circularization burn, and we're officially in orbit, with 737 MAX Delta V to spare, and all that's left to do is to grab some science while we're up here and wait 4 hours for Tito to get his fix of space. We're going to take Jeb out of here and do some EVA reports over top of different biomes around Kerbin, and finally just bring this right back down to where we took it off from, hopefully. And re-entries with untested spacecraft are always extremely anxiety-inducing, And that's for good reason. I was trying to slow down as fast as possible here above the KSC, and well, boy, I got my wish. We lost complete control right above the KSC, which killed all of our speed and brought us down right over top of it, but also, you know, the SSTO was nearly torn apart in the process, so that's usually not pretty good. As I regained control, though, I also realized that it acted like it was pretty tail-heavy despite being, well, supposedly perfectly balanced inside the spaceplane hangar. Now, that might have something to do with maybe the air brakes or the really aggressive pitch on the wings. Either way, I was having a very hard time kind of controlling it and bringing it down for a nice landing, and also had a hard time losing speed, so I think the air brakes just were not cutting it, at least by my standards, which is at least like 2 Gs of deceleration. Everything not buckled down should be flying forward the second I slam on the brakes. And speaking of which, we came to a relatively fast stop, and we have officially brought Tito back from orbit, and he's a little bit shaken up, but still alive, so he has to pay us. We got a little tiny bit of science and a whole lot of money from that, and Tito leveled up. I guess he's better at taking pictures now. And of course, I think it's pretty obvious our SSTO needs some upgrades. We ran out of electrical power and had to really manage it on the way back down, so I'm going to add some extra batteries in there since we don't have solar panels yet. And I'm also going to add a Reliant engine in the middle, because despite being heavier and less efficient than the other engines there, the Terrier engines, I think the extra thrust-to-weight ratio will actually end up benefiting us and getting us a little bit of extra delta V. I'm going to try out using these elevons here as air brakes, set them up almost like ventral fins there, and we're going to add a little bit of extra fuel there because we had our fuel ratios a little bit off when we came in for a landing. So we're going to test out the new improvements to this, and this time on board we have a familiar face. If you've played KSP, Bob Kerman, who is a scientist, and he's going to help us reset the experiments so we don't have to carry extra experiments. And we're going to try at least to head to the Mun on this. So we'll see how much Delta V we get in the end, though, and it's going to be basically the exact same takeoff procedure as all of the SSTOs that's used Panther engines so far. Bob is chilling in the back here. Bob also has a, has a pretty low courage factor, so you may notice in the Kerbal IVA views in the corner there that Bob is usually freaking out most of the time and Jeb is laughing, which is pretty standard for the course when it comes to Bob and Jeb interactions. But right now they're both looking pretty darn happy, and I am too, because somehow we managed to actually over double our Delta V amount in orbit. We now have 1500 Delta V in low Kerbin orbit, which should be plenty enough to get us a Mun intersect and then a Mun orbit and then bring us back to Kerbin. So it should be plenty for that. So we're going to get a nice little low pass of the Mun here and a lot up just the Terrier engines and not the center Reliant engine and fly this thing out to the Mun. And this is probably my favorite shot, definitely my favorite shot of the video. Absolutely love the zoom in here to the crew cabin, where I learned a pretty valuable lesson, a useful/valuable lesson. If you unbuckle while the ship is accelerating, FreeIVA actually accounts for that and throws you to the back of the crew cabin, which is pretty darn useful if you want to make like an artificial gravity station or something like that. But in our case, Bob just got a bit beat up there and couldn't make his way back up front. Which sucks for him, but that's going to be pretty useful in the future when we need to do very, very long travels across the extended Kerbal System, maybe out to Sarnus or any of the other outer planets. We got a very nice equatorial encounter with the Mun, and I turned on the landing cam here, which we finally remembered actually existed, and you could actually see the Mun in it, which I thought was pretty darn cool. I'm actually going to walk Jeb back here and swap him out for Bob because we need Bob up front to reset our experiments and leave the cabin constantly and stuff. And Bob gave us an interesting look. And Jeb clearly forgot to bring his razor along with him. But we're going to take Bob up to the front here, and we're going to have him go EVA and reset all of our experiments. It's actually nice being back in KSP 1 where Kerbals have classes and you can level them up and everything. It really gives you a reason to bring specific Kerbals along with you or multiple Kerbals with you. It gives you a reason to actually pick your crew out, and I really love that about the game. He's going to go ahead and reset everything, which is super useful, means we don't have to bring along extra mystery goo containers, or God forbid, bringing along 2 Science Juniors. That would be horrible. And here we are at the Mun, which magically got brighter as we approached it. And let me know in the comments if you know what caused that, because it's a little bit weird and off-putting whenever it just gets brighter as you go across it. Of course, we're doing a ton of science. We're getting Bob in and out, resetting the experiments, and getting EVA reports as we pass over top of new biomes, which is basically like that glitch that I used in KSP2, but in this it's completely not a glitch at all. You can just go into a low orbit around any object and just farm EVA reports over and over again as you pass over different biomes. It's it's very useful for gathering a lot of science quickly, and I just love the KSP1 science grind. That's why I haven't got any mods to really fix that or anything. I don't like the idea of having a button or something telling me what reports I have. It kind of gives me something to do, more or less, while we're in space, and, you know, wings don't really do much in space, and that's kind of my thing. We had plenty of fuel left over, so I did a pretty inefficient return to Kerbin, and it's time for your favorite part of the video, where I have to air brake over and over and over and over again. And this time I actually tried to do this weird maneuver thing, which is not really a maneuver, it's losing complete control in the upper atmosphere, but you know, it works for getting us down to the KSC on the exact spot that we want to, and lining us up for the approach that I'm most familiar with that runway. Unfortunately, though, despite our improvements in moving the wings around and lessening the angle of attack on the wings, we ended up being tail heavy once again somehow, and so I moved all of the fuel up to the nose there and came in for a landing. It wasn't that good at all, but it was a very slow landing. But we haven't broke anything, and that concludes our mission to the Mun. And now all that's left is to finally visit Minmus. And that's going to take us adding a little bit of extra fuel and maybe improving the efficiency of this just a little bit more so that I'm comfortable going all the way out to Minmus. And one thing that's going to help a ton with that is all of this science that we got from our trip. So we head into the R&D center, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up this node that has a EVA science kit, which will be very handy on Minmus, and a few other nodes with solar panels, RCS thrusters, and finally we own the Panther engine fair and square without the scam, along with a bunch of Mark II parts now. But we're not going to add any Mark II parts to this, we're just going to add a new set of Terrier engines on the side here, along with a bunch of extra fuel. And we're going to completely redo the whole system here with the air brakes and everything. We're going to double up on the vertical stabilizers, and then those are going to act as our air brakes because we're going to have them deploy in opposite directions, and I'm thinking that much surface area turning that sharply should really slow us down fast. We're also going to widen the base of our landing gear here, just so that we're less wobbly whenever we land. Also added these reaction wheels on the side there, and that's just going to help us when we're in space with keeping this thing oriented correctly. There we undid the brakes, and I think they look really cool. We actually have the canards on the bottom there deployed down to counteract the torque on the craft, so everything evens out, and we're just getting a braking effect and not nosediving, which would be pretty darn bad. We're also going to test out the middle engine here to see if this is going to be high enough to activate the Terriers. Turned out we had some pretty good ISP, so I went ahead and lit all the Terrier engines, and I had no idea whether or not this was actually going to work or not, but we gradually worked our way up to orbit despite not having that high of a thrust-to-weight ratio at first. It gradually built up as we lost fuel, and it was looking like it was going to be pretty darn efficient. Once we finally got our apoapsis burn in to circularize everything, we ended up with a whopping 1,871 meters per second of delta V, which is a good bit more than what we had with the last version of this, and I think we could actually push it a little bit farther with maybe a better ascent or just setting everything up a little bit better. So we're going to get a intersect with Minmus, just a very basic one, and we're just going to do a mid-course correction on the way there, because I'm a big fan of just getting a basic intercept with pretty much anything and then just fixing it later on down the line, because I am pretty lazy when it comes to pretty much everything. I actually ended up manually doing the whole intercept and everything because, well, of course I messed up the maneuver node. I'm kind of used to having the hold maneuver node and stuff, and also, so far the planes that we've had haven't controlled that well in space, obviously, which makes it pretty darn hard to hold the maneuver exactly where it's supposed to be. Here's that mid-course correction, though, that I was talking about, and yeah, this is probably the most overly complicated trip to Minmus I've done in a while, for absolutely no reason. The mid-course only costed like 4 delta V, luckily, and we were able to get a nice equatorial encounter with Minmus, which should line us up pretty darn well once we get there to land at one of the Minmus flats, which is usually where I always land at, and that's just because I can land on the edge of one of them and get several biomes around them without much effort, and they just look cool at the same time. Here we are at our Minmus periapsis here, and I'm just going to go ahead and burn retrograde until we get into orbit, and then we're just going to continue burning retrograde because we ended up lining up pretty much perfectly with some flats that look like they would be perfect to land at. So we're just going to keep burning until our trajectory ends up landing right there around about the flats. We don't need to get this exact and pull out the trajectory mods or anything. We can just land anywhere around there and jetpack our way over to anywhere that we need to go. We're just going to go ahead and time warp over to where we need to land at, and I'm not trying to worry about being efficient or anything with this because we have plenty enough Delta V for this mission, and yeah, that's kind of the reason I wanted to get extra Delta V, so we didn't have to worry about cutting corners and being super precise or something like that. I much prefer the brute force method of just packing way more Delta V than you need and not really worrying about it. Here we are coming in for a very, very nice landing, and we're just going to rotate down until our front wheel finally, after a very long time of the Minmus gravity, the wonderful, wonderful low Minmus gravity, our front wheel touches the ground, and we can officially say that we have landed on Minmus, the first time we have ever landed on another world in this series, on another object in this series. And I'm sure this is the first of many, many, many other landings on other worlds, and within 30 seconds of being here, the Kerbals already want to eat the dirt, which is quite a problem whenever you bring Kerbals to Minmus. They tend to think that it's a mint ice cream. I guess that's the reason why they kind of made it not so minty looking in KSP2, so the Kerbals wouldn't eat it. Yeah, so that's a bit of a problem. I mean, they had to take their helmet off for that, so I imagine that ends up with a lot of them dying. We get some surface samples here, though, which give us a ton of science. Just so much science to be had around here. It's very, very nice to finally land somewhere and be able to get this much science. We also, of course, brand Minmus here with the aircraft-only series. And Bob is a little bit skeptical about getting out, and as he left the canopy, I think he kind of forgot how weak Minmus's gravity is and jumped right through and came in for a pretty darn hard crash landing. I don't care how light the gravity is on Minmus, that had to have hurt. Luckily though, it didn't affect his golf swing whatsoever, and he was able to perform the EVA science kit and get us 125 science out of that, which is very, very nice. I love that their science kit is just hitting a golf ball. That's just great. We're also going to fly him over to this mountain over here, this little hill. I love that even like 100 meters above the ground on Minmus, you can tell how round it is, even at that small, tiny little height. Yep, Bob isn't too good at the landings today. Good thing he's pretty durable. I also noticed this little rock over here, this weird-looking, like almost moss-covered rock. I decided to fly him over to it. We also quickly got a surface sample from this biome before I went over there, just to make sure that we got that and we didn't cross into some other biome or something else like that. And Bob did the weirdest thing I've probably ever seen. He learned how to do a forward backflip thing, and then completely saved it with the EVA pack. I mean, that was a pretty good save. You gotta give it to the guy. Also had him crawl up on top of the rock here just to make sure that there's nothing else we can get from up here on the hill. And now it's time to fly all the way back to the plane, which is now like 6 kilometers away, and he doesn't have that much EVA propellant. Luckily, we were able to make it, though, just barely enough. 0.16, I think that is, EVA propellant left, so it was just barely, just by a hair. We're going to get him into the back seat here and go ahead and, of course, get Jeb into, and that concludes our Minmus mission here. And since we flew here, I figured we would fly away. Since we have so much thrust to weight ratio here on Minmus, we're able to just barely angle up and pretend like we're taking off in an atmosphere, which I thought was pretty darn funny. It looks like we're literally just taking off in an atmosphere. It did have some unintended consequences though, as you'll see here in a minute, but I mean, it's the aircraft-only series, we might as well fly away from Minmus, even if we aren't actually flying. We also got Jeb out just to do some very risky quick science there, and we almost hit a hill. That's the problem I was talking about with taking off like a plane, so we had to angle up quickly and miss Minmus. It also threw us out pretty far away from Minmus, so I didn't do as much of the whole EVA report grinding as I did with the last mission, and we just went ahead and left Minmus in the correct direction this time to do an efficient burn down to Kerbin, because we didn't have that much Delta V to play around with by the time we actually got a pretty much polar Kerbin, not encounter, but a polar Kerbin orbit there once we left. And now it's time to air brake and air brake and air brake. And this one actually controlled a lot better than the other versions of this SSTO, and I was able to really control the air braking with this. And I was able to bring it right down to Sandy Island, which is where we're going to be landing at, very easily, and actually literally fly it down from the upper atmosphere all the way down. Though it was a pretty rough trip down to Sandy Island. It stayed in control the entire time, and I never lost control of it. And up until here, the air brakes worked, and then the air brakes started causing us to side slip extremely heavily. And yeah, this was the squirreliest landing, the weirdest and craziest landing I believe I may have ever had. We were flying sideways at one point, flying sideways in a completely different way at this point, and nearly completely stalled out before we finally brought this down to the runway. And honestly, it wasn't that bad of a landing given given the approach circumstances there. You see immediately when I activated the brakes, we started sliding sideways again, so I think those air brakes were not the solution. But I wasn't going to leave it at this, and I decided to go back quick save and land this thing properly. So we went back a quick save and brought this in for the same approach, but this time I stayed off of the air brakes until the very, very last moment that I could. Yeah, I floated it down the runway a little bit, given this is a very short runway, but we did bring it down for a very soft, very buttery landing. So this SSTO is pretty much optimized, but we are going to have to change out those air brakes yet again later down the line. But now it's time to see how much science we actually got out of this whole mission, and you're going to be shocked because we actually managed to get 1,241 science. Yeah, get ready for the series to start going into hyperdrive because that is going to progress us really fast. I think we're either going to go to Duna or even the next episode, so let me know which one I should go to if you made it this far into the video. That is all I've got for today though, so Smooneychad out.